His rich family humiliated me for not being good enough. They didn't just make me feel unwelcome. They subjected me to a calculated, cruel assessment based solely on where I came from, a world they clearly viewed as inferior to their own. It was a public dismantling of my confidence and a harsh introduction to the reality that, despite the love I shared with their son, I would never truly measure up in their eyes. My name is Emily, and my life has been built on hard work, not inherited wealth. I grew up in a loving, modest home where values and effort mattered more than money. I put myself through college and established a career I was proud of, independent and self-sufficient. I knew the world of old money existed, of course, but it felt very distant from my reality. That was until I met Liam. Liam was everything I could have wanted in a partner: smart, kind, funny, and genuinely good. He also happened to come from significant wealth, a fact he never hid, but never flaunted. He moved through life with an ease and privilege I couldn't fully comprehend, yet he was always grounded and treated everyone with respect. We fell deeply in love. And after 2 years, our relationship had grown serious enough that the topic of meeting his family, the illustrious Sterlings, finally came up. I was excited, of course, but also incredibly nervous. Meeting your boyfriend's parents is always a big deal, but meeting the Sterlings felt like preparing for an inspection. I knew our backgrounds were vastly different, but Liam always brushed away my worries. "My parents aren't like that, Em," he'd insist. "They're modern. They care about me and who makes me happy. Your background means nothing to them." He made it sound so simple, so straightforward. He promised they would love me as much as he did. The invitation came for a formal dinner at their estate. It wasn't just dinner, it felt like an event. I agonized over what to wear, wanting to be respectful but still feel like myself. I rehearsed conversations, steeling myself for stepping into their opulent world. Despite Liam's reassurances, the anxiety about not fitting in, about being judged by invisible standards, gnawed at me. I wanted so desperately for the evening to be a success, for them to welcome me into their family, to see that Liam's happiness with me was genuine and enough. As I got ready, smoothing down my dress and taking a deep breath, I pushed down the nagging fear that maybe, in their world, love wasn't enough if you weren't good enough by their measure. Stepping across the threshold of the Sterling estate was exactly as I had feared. Like entering a world entirely separate from my own, one built on generations of wealth and privilege I couldn't possibly relate to. The house was breathtakingly opulent, filled with museum-quality furniture and art, yet it felt less like a warm home and more like a perfectly curated display. Liam's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, greeted us with polite, reserved smiles. Mr. Sterling's handshake was brief and formal, his eyes assessing. Mrs. Sterling offered a cool cheek for Liam to kiss, her smile not quite reaching her eyes as she turned it to me. Their daughter, Clara, stood beside them, observing me with a detached, almost bored expression. "Emily, how lovely," Mrs. Sterling said, her voice perfectly modulated. "Do come in. Liam has been so eager for us to meet you." We moved into a vast sitting room. The furniture was beautiful but looked too delicate to sit on. A server offered drinks, champagne, sparkling water. The initial small talk was polite, circling safe topics like traffic and the weather, but the undercurrent of assessment was immediate and palpable. They weren't just making conversation, they were evaluating me. The questions quickly became more personal, framed politely, but clearly designed to place me within their mental hierarchy. "Liam mentioned you grew up in Maplewood?" Mr. Sterling asked, naming my modest hometown as if it were an anthropological curiosity. "Small town, isn't it? Quaint." "Yes, it is," I replied, trying to keep my voice even. "I liked growing up there." "And your parents?" Mrs. Sterling inquired, her gaze sharp. "What do they do?" "My father is a mechanic," I said, stating the fact, with pride that felt, in this room, slightly defiant. My mother is a retired administrative assistant. There was a fractional pause. Mrs. Sterling's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Ah, practical professions. The way she said practical made it sound dull, ordinary, the antithesis of their world of finance and leisure. Clara, who had been mostly silent, spoke up. "Liam tells us you went to State University," she said, her tone one of mild surprise. "Did you enjoy that? So different from the—" She trailed off, implying the elite universities Liam and presumably his family attended. Each question, each comment, was a subtle but persistent reminder of the gap between my background and theirs. They talked about their various homes, their philanthropic endeavors, their social circle filled with names I didn't recognize. Liam tried to interject, highlighting things he admired about me, my intelligence, my work ethic, but his parents would smoothly pivot back to topics that emphasize their world or subtly undermine my place in it. "Liam works such demanding hours," Mrs. Sterling said, looking at me pointedly. "His partner needs to be able to manage independently, understand the complexities of his world." The implication hung in the air. I, with my practical background and state education, might not be up to the task. The polite facade never cracked, but the message was clear. I was being judged, measured against an invisible standard of good enough, based on wealth and social standing, and in their eyes, I was falling short. The subtle humiliation had begun. The transition from the sitting room to the dining room felt like moving to a different, more formal stage of the performance. The dining room was even more imposing, with a massive polished table that could seat 20, set with gleaming silver, crystal, and fine china. The atmosphere, already tense from the subtle jabs in the sitting room, became heavier, more focused. This was clearly where the main assessment would take place. Once we were seated, the conversation during dinner continued much like it had before, but the questions and comments felt more pointed, harder to deflect. They spoke about the arts, international travel, investment properties, topics that formed the everyday fabric of their lives but were entirely foreign to mine. When I tried to participate, offering a perspective from my world or asking a question, the conversation would politely but firmly be steered back to their realm. "Liam tells us you enjoy hiking?" Mrs. Sterling said, making the word sound rather rustic. "Our family prefers skiing in St. Moritz, or perhaps sailing in the Mediterranean, much more invigorating." "Yes, I love hiking," I replied, feeling my cheeks warm. "Getting out in nature, it's very grounding." Mr. Sterling chuckled softly. "Grounding, yes. Liam needs less grounding and more connection to the opportunities his position affords him." It was another veiled comment, implying my simple interests were somehow detrimental to Liam's high-powered life. Then came a more direct hit. Discussing Liam's career path, Mr. Sterling said, "Liam will, of course, take over aspects of the family, business eventually. It requires a partner who understands finance, understands significant assets." He paused, looking directly at me. It's a steep learning curve for someone not accustomed to that world. It was a clear statement that my lack of financial background, my upbringing outside of their world of wealth, was a significant disadvantage, a barrier to being a suitable partner for Liam. It wasn't subtle anymore. It was a direct challenge, a statement of my perceived inadequacy. I felt a hot wave of embarrassment wash over me. Liam, sensing my discomfort, finally spoke up. "Dad, Emily is incredibly intelligent. She picks things up faster than anyone I know, and her work in nonprofits gives her a perspective on the real world that's invaluable." Mrs. Sterling offered a thin smile. "That's very sweet, dear, but corporate boards and nonprofit boards are rather different ecosystems. One requires a certain finesse in social and financial circles that are learned from a young age." She looked at me again, her gaze pitying, dismissive. The message was loud and clear. My background hadn't prepared me for their world, and Therefore, I wasn't the right fit for Liam. My contributions, my intelligence, my character, none of it seemed to matter compared to where I came from. Each comment was a chip away at my self-esteem, a reminder that I was an outsider being judged and found lacking. By the time the main course was cleared, I felt completely drained. The polite smiles and barbed comments had taken their toll. My head was pounding, and I desperately wanted to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the dining room. The food, which was undoubtedly exquisite, tasted like ash in my mouth. The conversation continued around me, a blur of names and places and values that felt utterly alien. I excused myself briefly, needing a moment away from the table, needing to compose myself before facing the rest of the evening's assessment. Stepping out of the dining room felt like taking a much-needed gasp of air after being held underwater. Stepping out of the formal dining room and finding a small, quiet restroom felt like finding a sanctuary. I locked the door, leaning against it, my heart pounding. My reflection in the ornate mirror showed a face that was pale and streaked with silent tears I hadn't realized I was crying. The humiliation burned in my cheeks, a physical manifestation of the emotional pain. Steep learning curve. Not accustomed to that world. Practical professions. Their words echoed in the quiet room, chipping away at my composure. I splashed cold water on my face, took several deep, shaky breaths, and tried to remind myself who I was. I was Emily. I was smart, capable, and had built my life with integrity. My background was nothing to be ashamed of. Their world wasn't the only world, and their values weren't the only values. But in that moment, trapped in their opulent home, their judgment felt absolute and overwhelming. I wasn't sure how long I stayed in the restroom, trying to regain some semblance of composure. When I finally emerged, the house seemed even quieter, more immense. I found my way back towards the area where I heard voices. They had moved to a drawing room for coffee and dessert. Rejoining them was difficult. The atmosphere wasn't overtly hostile anymore, but the warmth was completely gone. Their politeness felt like a thin veneer over a core of disapproval. They spoke amongst themselves, comfortable in their shared history and understanding of their world, occasionally directing a polite but perfunctory question my way that felt more like an obligation than genuine interest. Mrs. Sterling asked about my career again, but this time with a tone that suggested it was a charming little hobby compared to Liam's important work. Clara made a comment about the challenges of finding truly good help these days, glancing subtly in my direction as she spoke to her mother. Liam was clearly uncomfortable now. He kept looking at me, his brow furrowed with concern. He tried to steer the conversation to topics we had discussed before, things he knew I was passionate about, but his parents would politely, but firmly, change the subject back to their own interests, or to aspects of Liam's life that emphasized his wealth and status. His attempts to include me felt increasingly futile, like trying to insert a foreign object into a perfectly sealed system. As I sat there, sipping my coffee, forcing a smile, listening to them talk, the realization solidified. This wasn't just awkwardness. This wasn't just a personality clash. This was intentional. They were deliberately making me feel unwelcome, highlighting my background as a deficiency, and making it clear that they didn't see me as a suitable match for their son. The pain of the dinner conversation was still raw, but it was hardening into a quiet certainty. I didn't belong here, not in their eyes, and enduring the rest of the evening wasn't going to change that. The air felt thick and suffocating. Every polite smile, every casual comment that underscored our differences, was a tiny cut. I looked at Liam, his face etched with discomfort, and I knew I couldn't stay here any longer. We needed to leave. We needed to talk. The carefully planned evening had been a disaster, a painful lesson in prejudice, and the true cost of marrying into a world where good enough was measured by everything but the heart. Sitting in the drawing room, listening to the Sterlings talk, the weight of their judgment felt crushing. The decision solidified in my mind. I had to leave. I caught Liam's eye across the room and tried to convey everything with a look. My pain, my need to escape, the urgency of needing to talk to him. His brows were furrowed with concern, and after a moment, he subtly nodded. He understood. A few minutes later, during a natural pause in the conversation, I turned to Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, Clara," I began, my voice polite, despite the turmoil inside. "Thank you so much for having me. It was a lovely dinner, but I'm afraid I'm not feeling entirely well. I think it's best if we head home now." It wasn't a complete lie. The stress had genuinely made me feel a bit nauseous. Liam immediately stood up. "Yes, Mom. Dad. Emily's not feeling well. We should get going." He seemed relieved, eager to leave. Mrs. Sterling's smile was polite, but cool. "Oh dear. I'm so sorry to hear that, Emily. Perhaps you're coming down with something." There was no real warmth in her voice, no genuine concern. It felt more like a polite dismissal, an acceptance that my presence was no longer required. Mr. Sterling offered a curt nod. Clara remained largely impassive. The goodbyes were brief and formal. Walking back through the grand foyer, the opulence that had seemed intimidating earlier now felt cold and unwelding. Getting into Liam's car outside felt like a physical escape, a release of the tension that had been building all evening. As we drove down the long driveway, away from the imposing house and the people within it, a wave of relief washed over me, immediately followed by the sharp, painful sting of the evening's events. The silence in the car was heavy for a few minutes. I stared out the window, watching the trees blur past, trying to compose myself. Liam reached over and gently took my hand. "Em, are you okay?" he asked, his voice soft with concern. I turned to him, and the tears I had held back all evening finally spilled over. "No, Liam," I choked out, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm not okay. That was awful." He pulled over to the side of the road, turning to face me fully. "I know," he said, his face etched with worry. "I saw. I'm so sorry, Emily. I had no idea they would be like that." They were judging me," I said, wiping furiously at my eyes. "Based on where I came from, based on what my parents do, based on where I went to school. They made it so clear that they think I'm not good enough for you, because I'm not from their world." I recounted some of the specific comments, the veiled insults, the way they systematically highlighted the differences in our backgrounds. Liam listened, his jaw tight. "That's not okay, Em. That's completely unacceptable. I told you they wouldn't be like that. I really thought they were more open-minded." "Open-minded?" I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. "Liam, they basically told me in their own polite way that my life and everything I've accomplished is quaint and practical and not sophisticated enough for a certain finesse required in your world. Your dad said I have a steep learning curve because I'm not accustomed to that world. They made it clear that my background is a problem." He pulled me into a hug, holding me tightly. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I never wanted you to experience that. They were completely out of line." His apology felt sincere, and his arms around me were a comfort, a reminder that he didn't feel that way. But the reality of the evening hung between us. This wasn't just a bad dinner. It was a fundamental clash of worlds, highlighted by his family's blatant prejudice. "Liam," I said, pulling back slightly, looking at him seriously. "This is their family. Your family. If this is how they feel, how can we possibly have a future together? Can I spend my life constantly feeling like I'm being judged and found wanting by the people who are supposed to be your family?" The question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of the evening. The love between us was real, But the challenge presented by his family's disapproval and prejudice was immense. We were at a crossroads, facing the daunting reality that our relationship wasn't just about us anymore. It was about navigating the deep-seated biases of the people he was closest to. We didn't go back to Mark's apartment. We drove straight to my place, where I felt safe and grounded. Sitting on my own familiar couch, the contrast between this comfortable reality and the opulent, judgmental world we had just left was stark. The raw emotion from the car ride had subsided slightly, replaced by a quiet, heavy sadness. Liam held my hand, rubbing his thumb over my knuckles. "Emily, I am so incredibly sorry," he said again, his voice full of regret. "They were out of line." "Completely out of line. They weren't just being difficult, Liam," I said, looking at him seriously. "They were judging me. They were making it clear that because I didn't come from their world, because my parents aren't wealthy, because I went to a state university, I'm somehow less, not good enough for you." Liam's expression hardened. "That's their prejudice. Talking, Em, and it's wrong. It has nothing to do with you. You are the most intelligent, kind, capable, and beautiful woman I know. What they said, it's a reflection of them, of their narrow view of the world, not a reflection of your worth. I thought they were better than that, more modern. But they're not," I pointed out gently, but firmly. "That's who they are, and they're your family. If this is how they treat me, how does this work, Liam? Can we just ignore this? Can I pretend that didn't happen every time we see them?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "No," he admitted. "We can't ignore it, and you shouldn't have to pretend. They were incredibly rude and dismissive. I need to talk to them. I need to tell them that their behavior was unacceptable." "And do you think that will change anything?" I asked, the doubt heavy in my voice. "Do you think they'll suddenly become welcoming and open-minded?" He was silent for a moment. "I don't know," he finally said honestly. "Maybe not completely. Their views are pretty ingrained, but I need to make it clear to them that you are who I've chosen, that you are my priority, that they don't get to treat you like that." We talked about the future, about the possibility of getting engaged, getting married, the idea of planning a wedding, of holidays, of family gatherings, all under the shadow of their disapproval felt daunting. Could our love withstand that kind of constant pressure? Could I endure being in their presence knowing what they thought of me? "Liam," I said, my voice vulnerable, "I love you. More than anything. But I don't know if I'm strong enough to constantly feel like I'm fighting for their acceptance, like I'm always going to be the girl from the wrong side of the tracks in their eyes." He took my hands again, his gaze steady and sincere. "You won't be fighting alone, Emily. I'm here. I'm fighting with you. My family's opinion, their money, their social standing. None of that matters to me compared to you. You are my partner. You are my future. If they can't see how amazing you are, that's their loss. I won't let them treat you like that again. I'll set boundaries. We'll navigate this together." His unwavering support, his clear choice to stand by me and against his family's prejudice was a powerful balm to my wounded spirit. The challenge was immense, the road ahead uncertain. But in that moment, sitting in my own living room, with Liam holding my hands and looking at me with such love and determination, I knew we would face it together. His family's judgment had hurt me deeply, but it had also revealed the strength of Liam's love and commitment. We chose each other, knowing the external battle that lay ahead, determined to build our future despite the world of old money and outdated prejudice. After the raw, honest conversation at my apartment, Liam and I felt a renewed sense of unity. The pain from his family's behavior was still fresh, but facing it together had solidified our bond in a way I hadn't anticipated. We weren't just a couple in love. We were a team facing an external challenge. The question of our future, once heavy with doubt, now felt like a shared mission. We spent the next few days talking extensively about how we would navigate this. It wasn't enough for Liam to just tell his parents their behavior was wrong. We needed a strategy for future interactions. We anticipated that the Sterlings wouldn't change overnight, if at all. Their prejudice was deeply ingrained. We discussed setting clear boundaries. Disrespectful comments about my background, my family, or my value would not be tolerated. If those boundaries were crossed, we would leave. It felt drastic, almost confrontational, but necessary. I wouldn't subject myself to that kind of subtle abuse again, and Liam wouldn't allow it. Liam did speak to his parents, reinforcing that his commitment to me was serious and independent of their approval. Their reaction was cool and measured, expressing disappointment that he wasn't seeing things their way, subtly suggesting I was changing him. It was a familiar tactic, trying to create a rift between us by placing the blame on me. But knowing this was their pattern helped us recognize and deflect it. The stress of anticipating future encounters was undeniable. Every phone call from Liam's side of the family, every potential invitation to an event, brought a knot of anxiety to my stomach. Would they be polite? Would the subtle jabs resume? Would I be able to maintain my composure? But knowing that Liam and I had discussed these possibilities, that we had a plan, and that he was prepared to stand by me in the moment, made it feel manageable. I continued to lean heavily on my own support system. Sharing our strategy with Emily and my family garnered their full support and encouragement. They saw the challenge we were facing and applauded our decision to confront it together. Their unwavering belief in me was a constant source of strength, reinforcing that my worth was inherent and not something the Sterlings could diminish. This external pressure, while difficult, ironically deepened my relationship with Liam. We became more open, more communicative. We had to rely on each other, anticipating potential hurdles and navigating them as a unit. Our relationship became a sanctuary, a safe space from the judgment of his world. In his eyes, in his words, I saw my true reflection, loved, valued, and more than enough. As we moved forward, we knew the path wouldn't be easy. There would likely be more awkward dinners, more veiled comments, more attempts from his family to sway Liam or make me feel unwelcome. But we were prepared. We were armed with our plan, our boundaries, and an unshakable commitment to each other. The challenge of overcoming deeply ingrained prejudice and protecting our relationship from external judgment was immense, but facing it together, hand in hand, we felt ready. Our love story was ours to write, and we wouldn't let anyone else dictate the ending based on where we came from. Months turned into a year, then 2, since the disastrous dinner at the Sterling estate. Our relationship with Liam's family didn't magically transform. Encounters remained polite but cool, marked by the boundaries Liam and I had set. If a comment veered into subtly condescending territory, Liam would smoothly redirect the conversation, or we would make our polite excuses and leave early. The open hostility of that first night wasn't repeated, but the underlying disapproval, the unspoken judgment that I didn't quite measure up, remained a constant, if now duller, presence. But as their prejudice remained stagnant, our relationship flourished. The challenge of facing his family together had forged an even stronger bond between us. We learned to communicate implicitly, a shared look or a subtle cue enough to signal support, or the need to exit a difficult conversation. Our love wasn't defined by his family's approval. It was defined by our shared values, our mutual respect, and our unwavering commitment to each other. We prioritized our happiness, our peace, and our future together above trying to gain acceptance from people who were unwilling to see past their own narrow view of the world. Slowly, the sting of the Sterling's judgment began to fade. It no longer had the power to send me running to the restroom in tears. I understood, deeply, that their opinion of me was a reflection of their own biases, their own insecurities masked by wealth and social standing, not a reflection of my actual worth. I knew who I was, Liam knew who I was, and the people who truly mattered in my life, my family, and my true friends, loved and valued me unconditionally. Their acceptance was my real currency, worth infinitely more than the sterling fortune. The concept of family evolved for me. It wasn't solely about blood ties. It was about connection, support, and unconditional love. My own family, who welcomed Liam with open arms and never questioned his background, and my chosen family of friends, became the true anchors of my life. Liam had, in his own way, created a new family unit with me, one where respect and love were the only entry requirements. His relationship with his parents became one he managed on his own terms, keeping our life together protected from their negativity. Then, one beautiful afternoon, Liam proposed. It wasn't done at a grand gala or a society event, but during a quiet walk in the park, a place that felt real and grounded, like our love. I said yes, my heart overflowing with happiness. Planning the wedding was a joyful process, focused on celebrating our love with the people who truly supported us. The Sterlings were informed, of course. Their reaction was measured. They attended the wedding, maintaining a polite distance, but their presence was peripheral to the overwhelming joy and love that filled the room, generated by the people who truly mattered. The journey from that humiliating dinner to becoming Liam's wife was a testament to resilience and the power of choosing your own path. I learned that prejudice, especially based on something as superficial as wealth or background, says far more about the person holding it than the person it's directed at. I learned that fighting for your worth isn't just about countering someone else's cruel words, but about building an internal fortress of self-respect. Today, Liam and I have built a life together that is rich in love, respect, and shared happiness. We navigate the complexities of his world when necessary, but we do so as a united front, our bond unbreakable. His family's initial humiliation was a painful hurdle, but it ultimately led us to strengthen our relationship and define our own version of good enough, one based on love, character, and unwavering support. And in our world, that is the only standard that truly matters.